TV News.
From the north, south, east, west, and around Africa, we break the news.
One Nigeria.
Now you can catch all the actions live as the news breaks. We are Core TV News.
Welcome to Core
Our
TV
24-hour news station.
Thank you for joining us on Core Digest Tuesday edition. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. Boko Haram's attempt to extend the so-called Islamic Caliphate from Gaza to Bama met with some strong restriction yesterday and resistance, and it's all over the front pages of the news today, with the number of casualties in the patch of the dreaded terrorist sect and all of that. But beyond that, we are turning our attention to security yet again this Tuesday morning as we discuss the Boko Haram debacle. Is it time for Jojo? Now, when you read the content from the papers, and of course, if you watched our news earlier, you begin to see that indeed the Nigerian military is at loggerheads with this set of criminals in northeastern Nigeria. But it will also amaze you with how much tenacity is being engaged in this fight and all of that. I'm joined this morning by a public affairs analyst, Bola Oba. Good morning, and thank you for finding time again to join us today.
Thank you very much for the opportunity once again.
Today, Kolawole is a legal practitioner. Good morning, barrister.
Thanks for having me.
Good to have you join us. Let me start with you, Bola Oba. What do you make of this recent attack on Bama, given the fact that it's coming at the heels when we just heard about an Islamic caliphate, and then one of the largest towns in Borno is yet again under attack?
If you may permit me or give me the grace to reframe your question, because I think your question is, to me, a bit not quite surgical enough. A couple of days ago, about a week and a half, the Boko Haram elements took some cities, one of which is Goza, or took some towns, one of which is Goza in that part of Nigeria. And when they took the towns, they officially declared an Islamic caliphate. In mimicry, emulation, imitation of what the ISIS is doing in Iraq, Syria, and the Levant area. I want to believe that these characters have a lot in common. They may be in direct or indirect communication, but there is a global phenomenon now that gives a degree of, that bets a degree of regional mimicry or regional imitation. It's a very unfortunate phenomenon. It's a very untoward phenomenon, but is heretic Islamism, a minority element who may be representing a larger body of Muslims who have been denied political and economic involvement in their various polities. Their children, it's just like we have, this thing is far more, is deeper than the ostensible religious facade it portrays. But we are where we are, our own Nigerian characters who are imitating the notoriety of what we see, what Osama bin Laden gave as part of contemporary global politics. They are doing what they're doing in that region of Nigeria.
Well, let me come to you, Barrister, quickly. I want us to focus a little bit more on what transpired yesterday before we go deeper into some other issues. The news is telling us that this particular sect met with lots of resistance from the Nigerian military. That's coming at the heels of what we call mutiny, the Zatas, and the Nigerian military. It looks like there's a wake-up. How do you react to that?
Well, before I address, let me quickly say that one is not surprised about the activities of the Boko Haram people in Bama and some of these environs. Before this war actually started, Bama used to be, apart from Maiduguri, used to be the center of activities of the Boko Haram insurgency. So that they had their mosques, they had most of their commanders, they were doing military training surreptitiously without, and I mean, with the security agents, and then the city governor of Borno State, Bunu Sherif, or what's his name now, turning a blind eye to the activities of the Boko Haram people. You also recall not long ago when the Boko Haram made an attempt to seize Bama. The Nigerian army was alleged to have used very, very heavy hand to repel them to such an extent that some houses and cars and all sorts of infrastructures were destroyed. And you find that even some people in Nigeria began to write letters to Amnesty International and some of these other organizations accusing the Nigerian military of committing genocide and also activities in there. Some international community also published a very graphic image that they got from the satellites that they have up there alleging that all sorts of atrocities were committed. So what I'm saying is the activities of the Boko Haram insurgency is not new in Bama. That they staged this last attack is just a way of reminding us that they are not out and out of that place. Now to your question as regards the efforts that the Nigerian army was alleged to have made or was reported to have made this last attack, I would say that is a commendable effort. You and I do know that the Nigerian army has been under immense pressure to really deliver on the challenges of liberating that axis of the country that has been in the throes of the Boko Haram insurgency. Yes, you and I do know the security people have their own challenges. We have had numerous times in the dailies, in the electronic media, of how under-equipped they have been, of how sophisticated the weapon the Boko Haram people are carrying, and then some other allied challenges that they have been facing. I would say if it is true, like we are getting, that the army was able to repel these attacks and all that, I would say kudos to them and all that. And I would also say that they should not relate on their war, because when you study the history of guerrilla warfare around the world over the ages and all that, it's usually a ding-dong affair in the sense that the insurgency army will come in there, they will be repaired, they will go back and come back again. It's going to be a continuous until they're probably totally neutralized, if it's possible to neutralize them.
Okay.
Let me also say this again, that the security people need to remind themselves, and the entire Nigerian people also need to be told that if the army do not address these issues very, very decisively, if they do not tackle this Boko Haram challenge decisively the way it should be tackled and all that, they should know that they will be the first casualty. And they also ought to be reminded that the Nigerian people are not too happy with all the efforts that have so far been made by the security, especially the Nigerian. To whom much is given, much is desired. All the noise about the Boko Haram people carrying superior weapons and all that are neither here nor there. When you look at guerrilla activities around the world, it is not the weapon that will really carry that determines your victory or the successes on the battlefield. It's usually the motivation, it's usually intelligence that you're able to gather, it's usually the support that you get from the local community in volunteering information and even assisting practically in repelling whatever insurgencies that is in the offing and all that. So I would say we still have a long way to go. Nobody should begin to start Eruka or victory. Like I say, it's going to be a ding-dong affair until they are probably able to neutralize them, which is going to take a long time to come.
Okay, bearing in mind that this particular state is one of the three currently under the emergency rule, reporters saying that the Nigerian military is deploying about, in addition, 1,000 foot soldiers to that region. Would you say that in this fight against terrorism, would you say we have the perfect picture of the strength of the enemy?
I am not an operative of the intelligence community. I am not a strategic commander of the army. I am just a news analyst. However, as a Nigerian, I am not totally at peace with the perception or the impression that one gets from news reportage from the theater of war. And why am I not totally at peace? I am one who believes, either foolishly or whichever way anybody looks at it, I am one who believes that given the contemporary antecedents of Nigerian soldiers, these boys are heroes. They are fantastic fighters. And I'm not saying it because I just want to sound very patriotic or very eulogistic to our servicemen. The commendations they get from international services they give to United Nations are indicative enough that our boys are not cowards. However, we also know that corruption has become so pervasive in our society that both political leadership and, as we have seen in recent times, military leadership are failing these boys. Our boys are good. They are damn good. We have a volunteers army, not an army where people are coaxed to go and enlist. These guys are so courageous, they woke up one morning and decided that they want to join the service. But you know what? We are living in a world where warfare, however minute the theater of war is, or however wide the theater of war is, we are living in a world now where you do not only take courage alone as the enviable currency of war to the theater of war. You take good intelligence. You take good equipment. Because, my brother, in the days when men used to fight with bayonet, courage, it was larger in value than technology. But we are in an age now where a ragtag army, like what Boko Haram presents now, can easily, through illicit machinery, through corruption in our political leadership, through people that we call infidels, secular infidels, within our financial system, they get to buy some of the most sophisticated equipment, warfare, weaponry on the face of the earth. So, where I am, it is our system, our leadership, political and senior military, that are failing our boys. But courage, they have enough. But you know what? I am also very conceitedly confident that this Boko Haram phenomenon will also pass, because we've seen it across the world. They will test the unity of Nigeria. They will abuse they will continue to do what they're doing in the Northeast, but ultimately, we've seen it before. I was a boy growing up in the 70s when we had cases of pockets of leftist guerrillas all over Africa, and literally all over the world. The Che Guevara that you people are celebrating today became an exporter, like Osama bin Laden became recently. Che Guevara was an exporter of, leftists and this thing against established entities. Not that one is justifying this thing, and even exported it as far as Africa. So these two will pass.
That's all right. We talked about courage of the Nigerian military. That's the subject of a lot of debates because when you consider the relationship that do exist between members of the Nigerian army and citizens or what they call civilians, many of us have different testimonies and stories to tell. But would you agree? Because
My brother,
we're
before you
talking
go too
about
far, I have a little objection.
just a minute, Bola. I'm gonna get
I
back
have
to
a
you.
little objection. I will not let you ridicule,
You're gonna
I will not let you
hold
ridicule
on
the
now, Bola.
servicemen.
Just hold on a little bit.
Because
I'm in charge here. Just hold on a little bit. I'm gonna give you time to make a
I will
contribution.
let you ridicule them
Just please hold on
because
a
I don't know
bit.
your observation.
Just hold on a minute.
We have to
We're
get
gonna
that
get
right.
them. Barrister, let me come to you. Would you agree that the opposition in this subject of discussion has more technological prowess than the Nigerian military? Because the thoughts of many is that Nigeria is a country blessed with such huge human and natural resources. How on earth would just a little part, a little group of people claim to be more, technologically empowered than the rest of the country? What are your thoughts along that line?
No, I don't think so. Each time I hear people, media men, each time I hear the Nigerian army complain that the Boko Haram people have superior weaponry, I just laugh. I laugh in the sense that, like I said earlier on, when you look at the history of guerrilla warfare all over the world, including the Che Guevara activities that my friend has mentioned, you find that it is not weapons that you hold that determine your successes on the battlefield. Rather, an effective guerrilla warfare and the containment of guerrilla warfare would depend on the lightness of your weapon. It's basically intelligence, and then your commitment, your patriotism, your ability to move very fleetly on the party. Where you shadow yourself with every weaponry and all that, you become a lame dog that can easily be picked up by the insurgency army and then wiped out like that. And the graphic example that we have about that is the American people when they went into Afghanistan. They were also in Pakistan and they're also in Yemen and all that. What was the success that they achieved when they went to Afghanistan? They just became a lame. What weaponry would you say the American army never had when they were confronted with the ragtag insurgency army in Afghanistan? Basically, they had everything. But still, for almost 15 years after that war started, they've not been able to continue this to such an extent that they are negotiating behind the back, at the back, with the ragtag insurgency army in Afghanistan. So that is one. Secondly, some of us try to get feelers on the battlefield, especially from some of the friends and relations and some of the people that we really have in the army. And we get the information that most of the weapons that the Boko Haram people are using were actually weapons that they seized from the Nigerian army, whether it be APC, whether it be AK-47, whether it be the grenades and then grenade launcher they do that. I will give you a graphic example. I won't mention them. We have this young boy who went to Kaduna, southern or some parts of Kaduna, Kano, to do his NYSC. And he was deployed to a village to do his NYSC. He is a teacher in there. Where he's doing his NYSC, he told us a graphic story of one day when the Boko Haram people came, they invaded the army barrack and the police post that was in that community where he was doing NYSC. What did the Nigerian army people do? They just withdrew, the police also withdrew another. And then the Boko Haram insurgency boys just went into the army barrack, went into the camps of the police and another. And all the weapons that the army and the police abandoned in there. And the pick-up van that the people just drove them away. So, what am I trying to say? Is it that there's a complicity between the soldiers and the policemen who were manning that community, who were saving that community? Or they practically showed cowardice by turning a blind eye when the invasion and when the insurgency army came to the community. So what am I trying to drive at them? If anybody tells you that the Boko Haram soldiers or the Boko Haram insurgency boys have better weaponry than the average Nigerian soldiers, and they are not telling you the whole of the truth. Something is missing somewhere. And that missing link, I will want to agree with my friend, that is the corruption that has pervaded the system. Because when a nation is corrupt, every start of that society goes rotten. They become soft. They are unable to stand up to the scrutiny and to the challenges of modern societies. I'll give you an example. Take the recruitment into the Nigerian army, for example. Before you can get to the Nigerian army today, you will require either to have a letter from one general, from one emir, from one police commissioner or IG of police. So if people go into the army with that kind of background, Not that they want to make army an evocation. Not that they are convinced that is a place to be. But because they simply wanted a job and they think the army is a place you get your regular salary, because they have connections in the high places and other, they get in there. When they get into those places and other, I'm sorry to say, these are not people who might be able to deliver on the challenges that the army require. The army is not a place where you go to eat pepper soup and the sandwiches. It's a place for people who really have the God to do what is necessary.
It's all right. We're going to get there. But we had the retired cadet of the show last week who was in the Nigerian military for about 30 years, and he corroborated your stance as regards courage for the average Nigerian soldier. Put the blame on senior officials and politicians and all of that. But how would you, in your own opinion, how would you evaluate the relationship that exists today? Don't let us go far on the average Nigerian street between the civilian and men of the Nigerian military.
That question is very nebulous. Very, very nebulous. Which part of Nigeria are you talking about? If you're talking about Lagos, I essentially don't really have much to do with the army, and I live in Lagos. If you're talking of the South, they may be talking about JTF. If you're talking about the Northeast, they may be talking about the intrusion into their lives of Boko Haram and the misunderstanding sometimes of being mistaken as Boko Haram. So you cannot just ask a question that is so blanket that you would expect, me to
No, maybe I should give you a more specific understanding on the question.
Okay.
Because I don't ask blanket questions.
No,
here.
yeah, that was a bit too
for instance,
nebulous for me.
what happened in Lagos in preceding months, we saw an allegation against the military with what happened with the BRT attack, where a BRT allegedly knocked down a Nigerian military officer who was riding along the BRT lane. And as we speak today, there are still not much light into the dark areas that are not known to the media. I was there in person to interview, people who were present there, who were eyewitnesses. Now, when you pick examples like that, how do you evaluate the reverence that the civilians do have for the members of Nigerian military?
When you pick examples like that and you use them as questions on a platform like this, it is inevitable that you will get a negative portraiture. You will get a portraiture that stigmatizes the army as a whole because of the conduct of about. We have an army that I know must not be less than about 80,000 cumulatively armed services. That is the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. But because of the misconduct of about, say, 10 soldiers on Ikorodu Road in Fadeyi, or maybe let's even go to Badagry, where an incident happened not too long ago, about 2 or 3 years ago, when some soldiers, defying the authority of their leadership, also misbehaved. It's inevitable. We will easily paint a portraiture of people who are not disciplined, who are not easily controllable, and who should be made to be distant from the society, if that is the question. But otherwise too, I have seen instances, and I want to civilianize your question for you. I have seen instances of last mile operatives on the same road. They are not army, they are not even police. I've seen instances of last mile operatives on that same road manhandling people. I've read about an instance of a last mile man, unbeknownst to him, slapping a man that he did not know was the chief magistrate of Lagos. You understand what I'm saying? When people sometimes are left in positions of authority, forget about that position of authority being uniformed. When people find themselves sitting in a position of authority, they tend to go beyond measure, because we live essentially in a society where people over-glorify their positions above respect for the rule of law. And it is almost inevitable. You want me to shock you? I can take you to places in Alausa, and I will predict the misbehavior that officers will do there if you go into those offices and they are civilians. My brother, rentierism, indeed, the decadence that you see manifest now in our armed services and other services are decadence pervading from political leadership. essentially owned by civilians. Let me give you, without being antagonistic to the position of my brother, let me give you an example why somebody ordinarily will run and let Boko Haram take his arm. You know why? When you are sending me to the battlefront, and as soon as I am killed, the following day you are kicking out my wife and my children from the barrack accommodation. When you are sending me to the battlefront, like they are sending them to Boko Haram in the northeast, and an average soldier is given 1,000 naira to eat for one day, and you can hardly find mama put around you 1,000 naira. Not even you who lives in Lagos can subsist on 1,000 naira a day, where you can easily get mama put where you can buy bread 100 naira and 100 naira. They give them 1,000 naira. My brother, when there is no motivation, the best armed army on the face of the earth becomes a useless army. The first thing you work on when you are deploying people for a job is first to work on their motivation. And what would naturally get a man to be well motivated? You properly incentivize the man.
So
I am a capitalist, and I know that it does work when a man is properly. Since the Phoenicians had invented money, there is no better incentive for man to do anything than to give the appropriate price for the job you are giving him.
It looks like we have a justification for the perceived lapses in the army.
I wanted to chip in something on the Korodu issues that you mentioned. I agree with you that there's a tendency all over the world for a few miscreants within the services to misbehave. Not long ago, you have seen even American soldiers within their barracks who turn in their weapons against their fellow soldiers and then go on the killing spree. It has also
in Iraq, they killed civilians. In Afghanistan,
but for us in Nigeria,
some of them,
in Nigeria, I think the challenges we have, like he said, is political. You know, we came back from long years of military rule, and when you have had that, at that period in time, the military boys or the so-called the soldiers who were governing us at that period in time, well, they are Alpha and Omega. They dictate everything in the society. They were not subordinated to anybody. So we have a challenge in our hand today. Two challenges basically: subordinating the military to civilian authorities. We have that challenge. We also have the challenge of subordinating the people in the services to the rule of law. Before then, like I said, they have always behaved and believed that they were above the law. So it will take a lot of education, sensitization, motivation, mobilization, and thorough education of the people in the service to really begin to subordinate them, not just to the rule of law, but also to civilian authority. By the time we are able to do that, I'm sure the kind of thing that we saw on Okororu Road will become a thing of the past.
Given the challenge we have at hand, fighting Boko Haram, what relationship should exist between the civilian and members of the Nigerian Army?
A lot. You see, I keep saying this. There is nowhere in the world. Maybe Russia is different when they had their Chechnya challenge and all that. Putin, in his usual high-handed manner, rolled in several times and deployed hundreds of thousands of soldiers and all that. And they're able to overwhelm the Chechnya community and then kick out the insurgency, Islamic insurgency.
It's still subsisting. It may not be as notorious as violent
as it was. But besides in other places, I know it's always been very, very difficult for any regular army to be able to defeat an insurgency army such as the guerrilla army. It has always taken the efforts of the local community. And like Chairman Mao said in his book on guerrilla warfare, that without really divorcing the insurgency army from the local community, you hardly can defeat them, because the local community provides a kind of water, like a fish will require water to be able to survive. So you must really, if we are going to defeat this insurgency army, I have the feeling that 70% of the job, in fact, would have to be done by the local community. Without that, it's going to be very, very difficult for us to defeat them. Why do I say this? The insurgency army soldier, the Boko Haram, does not live in the air. They live in the community. The insurgency army soldier, the Boko Haram, would have to deploy the arms and ammunition to the different terrains and all that. They have to cross boundaries before they can be effective in whatever attacks that they want to call. Secondly, sometimes they have to interact with the local community in terms of the local purchases, food items, groceries, and whatever. So if the local community do not cooperate with them, if they do not want to abort them, chances are that they begin to volunteer information to all the required services and security agencies in such a manner that such information become very, very, very useful in tackling the insurgency. I mean, so the local community have a lot of role to play. And like I would want to emphasize, in fact, 70% of the job would have to be done with the local community. If we have to.
I have a dialectical annotation. I have a dialectical annotation to add to what the gentleman has just said. Valid point. You see, in a state of asynchronous war, in a state of war when you don't have two conventional armies facing each other, using the basic known methodologies of warfare between armies, when you have a conventional army trying to contain a guerrilla movement or an insurgent movement, you need inevitably the support of the local community. But if look at all the places, that is why I want to tabernacle on the political face of this now, and you will get it. Look at all the places in the world. Look at the case of ISIS in Syria, in Iraq, Syria, and the Levant. Let me give you another example. Look at what is happening in some parts of Indonesia, where you have Muslim insurgents disturbing the peace of the nation. I want to go another way. You know, in all those places, you will discover that the government, either at the state level or at the national level, must have failed the people on the ground. When you have a political superstructure that is not accommodating enough to stretch the hand of political inclusivity to people who live in a particular area, and because of that political denial, it has also reflected in their economic denial. You must remember that more northerners have ruled Nigeria, but the northern part of Nigeria is one of the most underdeveloped on the continent of Africa. Majority of those who ruled us were megalomaniacs. They stole money for themselves, not to develop their people. We also live the misrepresentation that because more leaders came from the north, that most northerners are better off. An average southern Nigerian is materially better off than an average northern Nigerian. Now, in a state of political, when you are in a state of political disconnectivity, my brother, if any of your children, let me give you a living example. Why am I going to Northeast Self? I was born in Mushi, raised in Mushi. If I was not fortunate to have been sent to school by my single parent mom Yeleja and ended up going abroad to study and having bettered my life materially, I probably would have been a thug on the street of Mushi and I'd be killing happily. And you have got bad news for you. As we speak now, there are days that we drive to Mushi and they'll be telling me about some carnages that happened the night before or a couple of hours before I came. Mushi, Lagos. Mushi, Lagos. You know those who are perpetrating it? People who fell down. That is why political leadership must not be about, it's my turn, it's your turn. This thing, and a clique of small elite will be betting themselves at the expense of the majority. When I was growing up in Lagos, it wasn't so much the culture for people to be building high walls on their palatial houses. We will be walking down in Surulere or walking in Ikoyi and we'll be looking at beautiful houses across the fence because the fences were not taller than this. When the middle classes and the intelligentsia started failing the majority, we are raising our fence up. Ebola Day. We'll see.
It's
let me quickly. Yes, it's no doubt we can situate some of these challenges within the material deprivation that we do see in the north. But there is also an historical antecedent to the insurgency that we do have in the north.
Okay.
I give you an example. You and I will remember that the Usman Danfodio Jihad, that cannot be situated purely within material deprivation, so to say. And when you move from Usman Danfodio Jihad, you also remember that before independence, there was a massive agitation from another part of the country for the Islamization of this country. In fact, it was going to tear all the preparation for independence apart, in which certain elements in the north said except they are now to be governed by the Sharia, they were not going to, team up with the rest of Nigeria to get independence in 1960. It became very problematic to such an extent that all the intelligentsias, all the political leaders and the community leaders had to put their heads together. And then they came up with a consensus, which was an abridgment of the Sharia. That was when it was now decided that the northern part of the country should adopt or use the penal code, and then as their own criminal, so to say, law. And then the southern part of the country now adopted what we call the criminal code. So, and then when you move away from there, you also go back to during the military and all that. You remember the Matasini riot and all the rest of the Bulukutu riot and some of these other riots. All of them were predicated on one thing: the attempt and the desire to Islamize Nigeria as a country. And then you move from
economic reasons have aggravated that.
Let's anchor this very well. And then you move up from there. You will remember that here Ahmed Yerima Sharianization project. Not a single political state in the north. Okay. When Ahmed Yerima came up with the Sharianization of the northern part of the country, not a single dissent from the northern part. All the governors followed suit, and all of them went to their assembly, enacted the law, making the Sharia the operating principle. A place like Kano, for example, even, and then someone, I think Jigawa, which others say another, even establish a police force, the Hisba, to enforce the Sharia. So for me, I am not surprised today that the Boko Haram people are very active in a place like Kano State and some of these other. Most of the places that you have had the Boko Haram people very, very active are places where there has never been any reservation about the Sharianization of the.
Let me lay another.
Just a minute, brother.
Fantastic.
You also remember.
I have another point to lay
during the military. During the military, somebody like Ibrahim Babangida, somebody like Muhammadu Buhari is now pretending to be a Democrat and an anti-Boko Haram person. Were people at one time or the other tried to smuggle Nigeria into the Organization of Islamic Countries, the IOC. And when the rest of the country say, look, we want this country to remain a secular state, people like Ibrahim Babangida, people like Mohammed wanted to Islamize Nigeria. So what I'm saying, there's always been a tendency in this country, beside the material. I agree totally with him.
But gentlemen, just a minute.
I agree totally with him, but
just a minute, gentlemen.
Please, let me put a block on the fantastic foundation he has built.
It's all right.
Because we must nail it home. We must take it home for our people watching us or listening to this. As beautiful factually as the point the gentleman has made is factually, the aspect of it that he probably deliberately refrained from mentioning is that all these characters he mentioned were using Islam as a point of political instrumentation in the north. And they forgot to do one thing that a country like Malaysia did. Malaysia is also a Muslim country. Malaysia is also a Muslim country. But you know what Malaysia did? They used Islam. Those who were seeking political power used Islam to acquire political power. Mahathir, you will remember Mahathir, former Prime Minister of Malaysia. But he added something for them. He added vibrant education when he had consolidated his position as the leader of the country. Today, Malaysia is the only Islamic country on the face of the earth doing productively well per capita. Because even countries like this, even countries like the Saudi Arabias of this world, the Kuwait of this world, and even some of the Arab Emirates, Dubai, that's why I don't follow people to go to Dubai. They are time bomb waiting to explode. Because there are minorities in those countries who are deprived. And they are waiting for... Recently, you must have heard of what happened, how the Shia majority in
Iraq.
Not even Iraq. The neighboring country to Saudi Arabia, one small. This is it? No, not Kuwait. Is it Qatar?
Qatar.
Not Qatar. Qatar is where you have Al Jazeera. I will remember the name. You see, ultimately, you can use tribalism to get. I want to change the topic from religion. You can use any primordial or primitive point to score a political advantage. But immediately you score that political advantage, for that point not to come to haunt you again or become a tiger upon which if you fall from will devour you. Like most of the people in Meshana cannot easily live in their homestead now in the north. They nearly killed Buhari recently. if they had educated the people of the north since all this time they had advantages and are giving them, they have moved them to the middle class. Middle class people seldom go and bomb. You go and go to Abromi with the bomb.
Let's try to localize this. Let us bring this home. You know, to Bama, to Borno State, to places like Yobe, to present-day Nigeria, where we have the real-time challenge of Boko Haram. How do we boost economy? Of course, you heard about the civilian JTF. You heard about the Alumanjiri schools. How do we you know, unite all these factors together? Economics, religion, and, you know, in the face of Boko Haram? Because obviously, the federal government possibly is privy to all of these challenges. That was what inspired the civilian JTF. That was what inspired building schools in northern Nigeria. But it doesn't look like it's working.
Yeah, it's
the short time,
yes. In the short run, it might not be seen to be working. But more importantly, you find out the challenges that we have in there. When you have a war situation such as we do have in our hands today, it becomes a kind of hemorrhage on the economy. The society as a whole will be bleeding from all seams, as we have seen in those places today. But I have a strong, I agree with him totally that what we require to do is to evolve a kind of Marshall Plan for the northern part of the country.
For the whole of the country, actually.
The whole of the country, you know, which foremost would have to start from the level of education. Incidentally, my son is schooling in Malaysia. He's attending an American university, and he told me about the quality of the education that we do have in
not only theoretical education,
yeah, practical.
They will build houses.
That is totally different from the kind of thing that we do have in that. So we require to do
and it's a Muslim
like
country.
That. It is, of course. It is, of course. And we require to do something like that for this country. Secondly, there must be massive poverty alleviation programs in that part of the country. A lot of the people who are deprived. Take, for example, the Alimantiri. For God's sake, how could the northern leaders have left their people for ages?
15 billion youngsters.
Roaming the sea on a daily basis with
nothing,
opportunities
no
of how you get
nothing.
the square meal, and they just give them balls in and then allow them to roam the sea.
Who is a woman's spec of an IED? Improvise explosive device than that.
Take those children off the street and then begin to educate them and feed them and cater to them. You must give them some prospect that there is a joy.
There's a life
tomorrow. By the time you begin to do that, I'm sure people will begin to revolt and turn away from the Boko Haram insurgency.
Okay. But how do we do all of this in the face of the Islamic Caliphate, in the face of the Nigerian military, you know, fighting with the Boko Haram in Bama, for instance, as we speak?
Oh, sorry. Islamic, I wanted to say in my street lingo, Muslim lingo, that Boko Haram, they will soon pass. I'm telling you. You know why I'm confident that they will soon pass? The political leadership in Nigeria will soon realize, and I think they are beginning to realize, that Abuja may not be safe.
Of course, it's no longer safe.
I have a business in Abuja. When I called the boy, I used to go there every other week. In fact, for landing in Abuja, they give me 100,000 naira. But today, they will give me 100,000 naira. It's been a while I've gone to Abuja now. Because I know they don't bomb in middle class places where this thing that they will bomb in Yanya is like the equivalent of Ajegunle or whatever. But it's been a while I've been in Abuja because but it's been a while I've been in Abuja because if they are driving me from the airport, they will at least landslide before they take me.
This is an English language program, please.
Sorry, my brother. But you see, having said that, we have to have a short-term plan. Relevant question you've asked. A short-term plan, a medium-term plan, and a long-term plan. And all these plans must be denominated in improving the quality of life of the average Nigerian. That is where political leadership has failed us. My brother, let me be very honest with you. I was joking earlier on, and please permit me to be spicing this thing with you because it does make sense sometimes. Look at you. I used to live in Europe. And when we sit down as Nigerians or black people, They will be saying that the police is very discriminatory. They sometimes stop you. They will this thing. And I would always tell them that they never stop me. And they will say, oh, Mr. Bola, you are always pro-establishment. This thing. Because you know what? I used to, even if I was going to pee, I would dress with a suit, look very professional, and people know me in Europe now. I used to do a job like this. I would not a tie. If you want to profile somebody, the first criterion you use in profiling somebody will be the look of that person. If I see you this morning like this, even if you don't have a job, I would assume this guy is going to the office. Let's put in place policies, short term, medium term, long term, that will improve the quality of life of an average Nigerian anywhere in Nigeria. Okay. And that person will not easily subscribe to terroristic or iconoclastic dispositions such as the Boko Haram is one.
It's all right, gentlemen. Thank you for your time. When we come back after this break, of course, the discussion has been the Boko Haram debacle. Is it time for Jojo? There are names flying around now in the media as regards sponsors of Boko Haram. When we come back, we'll find out more about that and what should be done. Don't go away, please.
Glad to have you join us on another edition of The Political Arena, the most detailed and incisive political show.
If you are a sitting governor and the opposition is able to stomach structure against you, that means you are wicked to the people.
The end of our time as the legitimate authority to govern this country.
Give me 20 minutes to move or they will shoot me.
He has no chance for survival. If he likes himself, this is the best time to get out before he perishes.
The PDP as a ruling party has failed.
So anybody who thinks that government will fold his hands and allow miscreants to take over the streets of Osun State and cause havoc is deceiving himself.
The good, bad, ugly, and beautiful sides of the Nigerian political system. Join me every Sunday at 9:15 p.m. on KO TV News. From time immemorial, women have birthed life, shaped character, and by extension, influenced the society. Moremi of Ife, Emoten of Benin, Queen Aminat of Zaria, all women of influence and power.
Whether it's before election, after election.
How ironical. Women being so powerful, yet have few grounds in decision making.
They see you as a wife, and I see you as a wife to a man.
We are talking women in politics.
A woman will be bold enough to stand up and say, I want to become president of Nigeria.
Only on KO TV News.
Nigerians continue to
the city of Lagos once
Be the first to know from the north, south, east, west, and around Africa. We break the news.
We are one Nigeria.
Now you can catch all the actions live as the news breaks. We are KO TV News.
Welcome to KO TV News.
24-hour news station.
Welcome back. It's KO Digest Tuesday edition, and it's been a very interesting conversation ongoing in the studio. Why Tunde Kolawole believes strongly that the challenge in northeastern Nigeria is being years of radical, affiliation, religious affiliation. Of course, Golaba is pointing and showing light into the political dark areas as well as economic reasons, for all of those challenges. But Tunde Kolawole, let me come to you. You are a barrister. Over the time, we've been hearing of names, linking with sponsorship of terrorist acts in northeast Nigeria. Why isn't there anything being done about it? I asked a lawyer sometimes last week on the show that there are claims flying around. 1 minute PDP accuses APC of sponsoring Boko Haram, and then the other minute somebody just rises up. Can't we bring these people to give proofs for their allegations?
Well, it's possible, but even ourselves, we have to be careful so that we don't fall foul of defamation. It's easy to make allegations, it's easy to make accusations, but going to court to prove such allegations might be a very, very thorny issue in the sense that our courts don't act on speculation. It is the fact, the material fact that we're able to lay down on the table that the judge will base its decisions on. But that notwithstanding, we have a reasonable ground to suspect that there are probably certain people who are sponsoring this Boko Haram insurgency, either for political reasons, either for material gains, either for even religious beliefs, because there are certain people who believe that apart from subscribing to the 5 fundamental pillars of Islam, if you are also able in one way or the other to lend your hands to propagation of Islam, either through violence or non-violence activities, certain rewards might be waiting for you in heaven. I want to say this. Take, for example, the former governor of Borno State, whom it's already on the pages of the newspaper, has been accused severally of sponsoring and aiding and abetting Boko Haram. That is Sheriff. You and I will remember that when he was in there, he actually there are actually 2 members of Boko Haram in his cabinet. One was advisor on interreligious affairs, and one was also even the commissioner for finance. You also remember that during his reign as governor in Borno State, like I've said it on this program before, the Boko Haram people actually had their training camp in Bama. They also had in Goza, and then they were also very, very active in a place like Meduguri where they had their mosque, and then their proselytization was taking place. Somebody like Sheriff turned a blind eye to the activities of the Boko Haram at that period. He wasn't putting them in his cabinet. He probably was not financing the activity. He had made a proper report to the authority, and they had been nipped in the bud at that period. They probably would not have festered as much as they have done. You also remember the senator who is in the National Assembly, who was said to have been communicating with the Boko Haram. He is in court now. We can't speak too much on that, so that we don't be said to have fallen foul of the law of subjudice. But these are reasonable grounds. Certain communications that were taken from him show that he was actually discussing or having access to the Boko Haram. And you also will recollect that when the man who bombed the Madala church was arrested, and then he was put in custody of the police, we had the commissioner of police, Sakari Biu, who was supposed to be holding the man, actually letting the man go. If he wasn't a sympathizer, or if he never had some sympathy for the activities of such a person, how would somebody who was in police custody just been allowed to go in the manner in which the man was said to have gone? And then even before the man was arrested, where was he arrested? He was arrested in the Borno State Governor's land.
Liaison office.
Liaison office in Abuja. And you and I, even at the level in which we are now, we can't just walk into any of those liaison offices that easily. And then we'll be welcome and then accommodated. Furthermore, you also remember when Ali Mongono, who used to represent Nigeria at the United Nations, was abducted about Quran people. It took less than 48 hours before his release was negotiated. That tells you that there are certain people who had leverage, who had access, who could bring certain pressure to bear the Boko Haram people to really dissuade them to do what but they have refused to do so. What am I trying to doubt of this? There is no doubt about that. The Boko Haram people have some sympathy somewhere. Why it's become difficult for the government, whether at the state level or the federal level, to act on it is too obvious. That takes us back to what my brother was saying, that the political, the courage, and then the kind of politics that we play makes it really difficult, for example, for some of these people in the position of authority to really begin to ask the right question. I'm saying that certain people who are said who could be assumed to be aiding and abetting Boko Haram to really bring them. Let me give you an example. You would want to see, if it were America, Somebody like Sherry, somebody like that senator would have been on side. Once an American politician is alleged to have committed any crime, the political class would dishonest from him. But you now see President Goodluck Jonathan gives when Sherry wants to travel now to Borno State, the Borno airport at Sita to shut down. They would ask the authorities in the place to open the airport. He now access to the presidential. They say not too long ago. I'm sorry to say, we have not confirmed that even oil blocks have been allocated to him for.
It's all right. Just a minute before we go ahead. The phone line is showing on the screen for you to participate. All you need to do is dial the number. But while you do that, endeavor to turn down the volume of your TV set. Let's keep the conversation via the phone line so we can do without the delays and the feedback distortion. Bolauba, close to a quarter of the 2014 budget allocated to security. Mr. President seeking for, you know, a $1 billion loan, you know, so to speak, to fight terrorism. And we have hundreds of people in detention, you know, in relationship with Boko Haram in northeast Nigeria. Why is it that not much light is shown, you know, to bring out the big names, just like he has established, you know, sponsoring this menace?
The political class is in a state of self-masturbation, our political class. And I pray that they will quickly realize that they are romancing Gorgon Medusa. They are trying to dance with Gorgon Medusa with the many strands of serpentine airs that she carries. Our political class needs to get their act. Members of our political class, they need to urgently get their act together because their loot may not even be security enough for them when if this country discombobulates. You know what? He gave you classical examples of personalities, short of mentioning names. And indeed, in some instances, he mentioned names. The Ndume, Senator Ndumes of this world, the Bunu Sheriff Musas of this world. These guys, as we speak, are working free. Ndume, like I rightly said, so that one does not err on the side of the principle of sub judice.
Just a minute, Bola, we have a caller from our show. Hello, Musa. Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Please go ahead with the contribution, Musa.
Good morning, sir. We thank our elderly men that are being talking this morning. We greet every one of us that are there. My own conclusion is that, you know, the leaders we have in Nigeria here, I think they lack focus. Focus in the sense that, to me, the security issues are not something we're supposed to be working on. All this, what they are doing, even what they are telling us is that what they ask only is only money. If it is not money, all of us know that this year's budget, we hear the number of money or the amount they specify on the budget for security company. Where are those money? If the security men are saying that they are not motivated as far as is concerned, let us probe those people who citizens on those money. They know what they are doing. It is because they know that nothing can handle. That is why they are looking up the life of who the masses, the public. If they are saying, where are those money? Let us ask them. What of the budget? Where are those amounts the budget for the security issue? Let us ask them. They are selfless. That is what we can task them. Unless the people will stand up and have and advocate for them to stick to the ground. Unless they do something here in Nigeria, they are killing us. We are battling the issue of Boko Haram. We we are here to finish the battle, and the issue of Ebola is coming to here in Southwest. We need to stand up and do something about it. Those people are cancelled this year, BOKO HARAM people, where are they? Are they not Nigeria? They are part of it. If they are after our own, they're supposed to have done something to this. I believe that the security people or the security agencies, they must look for a way of and putting those people who are in the money or the budget being allocated for their own country.
It's all right. Thank you very much, Musa. I think you made your point here. He called from Oshun, but there's this, just in addition to what we're talking about, there's this public insinuation that not much is being done by the government to tackle Boko Haram. Where's this thinking coming from?
No, is much being done?
Close to a quarter of our 2014 budget allocated to, fighting insurgency, state of emergency in 3 northeastern states.
What is the meaning of a
Al-Bajuri School, civilian JTF? I can go ahead and count.
Okay, let me also go ahead on my own side too. What is the meaning of a budget? And I'm not talking about security budget alone now. I'm talking of budget across the board. What is the meaning of a budget that does not translate into physical, visible, discernible infrastructure or policy or quality of life improving atmosphere in a polity? A budget is what you say, oh, this is the X amount we want to spend to buy suit for our presenters. And after saying, we want to spend about 10 million naira this year to buy suit for our presenters so that they will look sartorially sharp and give our station, our network, a positive image. And after having read it, we keep seeing you wearing this black suit alone. What is the meaning of a budget? I'm a businessman, no?
The budget has failed.
Abi?
It's all right. Barrister, as we begin to round up on the issue, of course, we'll take a couple more calls before we go. Can military might categorically win this war against insurgency?
Alone, no.
No, I doubt it. I doubt it. It's almost impossible. I have given you this morning the example of the Americans when they went to Afghanistan. They were there for so many years with all the sophistication, with all the satellites in the air, with all the paraphernalia that any nation can never deploy against an insurgency. They've not been able to win that war. You also go to a place like Yemen, you go to Iraq, you go to some of these places and all that. It's been usually very, very difficult. But it's not impossible. We have given the example of Putin in Chechnya.
Even in Chechnya,
at least it was
there are still remnants.
There are still remnants. Not long ago, too, in Indonesia, I think they were able to crush the Islamic insurgency army in those places and all that. If we are going to defeat the Boko Haram, 2 things or 3 things would have to be done. The first, like I said earlier, is has to be a kind of concordance between the civilian population and then the military. If they are able to, if we are able to relay, if the two are able to relay...
Just a minute, Barrister. Yeah. We have a caller from Rivers. Hello, Chile. Hello, good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, welcome to Call Digest. Go ahead with your contribution, please.
I'm calling from River State.
Morning.
Yes. Yes, I want to add my voice on the reason why some of these people are not being arrested. In our situation, in Nigeria's situation, it is not possible in the political climate. It is not possible for the government to arrest any person on the fact that, for instance, if the president should order for the or the security people should order for the arrest of Indru, or Shitima or any other person, do you think the opposing political party will not think this is a witch hunting affair? Won't they accuse the government trying to pull some of their people down? The government is being cautious.
I'm afraid I think we lost that.
He made his point actually.
He
And he
already
made his point because, let's be very honest with ourselves. It's easy to castigate the president as, you know, not being seen, or castigate the leadership of the country or the police as not being seen to be arresting those who are in any way, shape or form indicted or seen to be in a form of circumstantial conspiracy with this thing. But when you start picking them too, they will start saying it's an act of political persecution. They are picking people from a particular this thing.
You know, it's quite unfortunate that we've not seen much of political cooperation, you know, between existing political parties in Nigeria in this fight against insurgency.
I have a point to make on that, if you permit me, please. You see, I once lived in England and I had the privilege of being a politician in England. I was actually a member, not only a member of the Conservative Party, I was actually also at a point chosen by the Conservative Party to contest a position in London Borough of Greenwich, St. Mary's Ward, London Borough of Greenwich. And in those days, when I was a politician in England, there was the Malay of IRA, a form of terrorism that was that was troubling the British nation. And you know what? Across the board, even to low level local government politicians, like I was then, there was a universal understanding by the parties and a direct line of education of anybody who would represent the party that on matters of IRA terrorism, you must give essential support to the government. Am I making a point? I don't see that kind of symbiotic, synergistic interrelationship between our main parties here regarding the untoward phenomenon of Boko Haram.
Just a minute, Bola. Let's take this call from Benue State.
Cross-stigmatize themselves.
Hello, James.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
James, go ahead with a contribution, please.
Yes, what I'm saying is that almost 90% of traditional rulers in the Boko Haram are some contacts with Boko Haram. Our friends of the activities of Islamic and Boko Haram in that state, Plateau, Benue, and Taraba state. And if you look at the attack in the northern state, almost all the places, 90% are Christian-dominated areas. Right now, if you look at Taraba, Nasarawa, Benue state, the Boko Harams, which are infiltrated by the headmen, are trying to intimidate people. And when people leave their houses in Taraba, Nasarawa state, they take over. And people are not going back to these people. When you look to the own authorities, they will not do something normal. I wonder what is going on. I think they are aware of the issues. I study peace and conflict prevention in Iran. And when I come back, I try to see how I can contribute to the conflict in Nigeria. But it's not easy. You can't take it away from the government. People who take over, who are in the villages, are more powerful than they are allowing you to do anything. So I think the government is not doing.
It's all right. Thank you, James, for your contribution from Benue State. Gentlemen, I'm afraid we're running out of time. But
you were...
Yes, I wanted to just conclude on what you were saying and just give you also your final comment. But Bola, I bet you didn't win that election in London.
I gave the Conservative Party the kind of votes they've never gotten in 30 years before I was selected.
It's all right, Barrister. Please, let us have your final comment.
When I would just say that the Nigerian politicians require to think like statesmen. Most times they don't. They think about the next election. And when politicians think about elections alone, that's why you begin to have the kind of divergent tunes over this Boko Haram thing. Because if it's Jonathan that is there to rule, you never know if the APC wins the election, what happens? So we must think about about the Nigerian nation and not as politicians.
Thank you very much. Goloba, you have 30 seconds. Let's have your final comments.
I really have to give my total support to the submission of the gentleman, because it's actually imperative that our political leaders learn to realize fast enough that they cannot make partisan the issue of Boko Haram. That this attitude that I see in the two main political parties wanting to stigmatize each other with the issue of Boko Haram is foolish, and the only people who will profit from it will be the Boko Haram adherents.
Yeah, well, it's been a heated debate, but we got a confluence between today.
To be honest with you, like I said, for the first time, Conservative Party did not lose their deposit in that election in 1997.
It's all right. Thank you, gentlemen, for your contribution today. He's a legal practitioner. Thank you very much for your time. Fantastic.
Always a pleasure.
The mushy boy himself, you know, always showing himself very strong on the show. Public affairs analyst. Thank you, gentlemen, for finding time to join us. Cold Ideas continues tomorrow as we'll bring you fresh topics, updates, and issues as they arise within and beyond Nigeria. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. Thanks for being there.
Nigerians continue to travel the city of Lagos, boys and girls, as always.
Be the first to know from the north, south, east, west, and around Africa. We break the news.
One Nigeria.
Now you can catch all the actions live as the news breaks. We are Core TV News.
Welcome to Core TV.
24-hour news station.